So, hey gang, this is Bailey Wiki. Actually, this is like an interesting episode here. This is going to be a start of a series. We hope you guys like it. I've got Zephyr on with me, which you guys never see us doing a video together, right? Hey, Zephyr.
This, this is, I think, a second after we did the walkthrough for the Gothic Castle. Otherwise, I don't think we've ever done one together.
That's right. So I'm this is a lot of fun. But we actually have a third guest. It goes by Voxer. Hey, Vox, how you doing?
Good. How are you guys?
Doing well.
Wonderful.
Good.
So what we thought that y'all would like to hear is Vox really has been doing, some playing on the Roll20 platform, and we thought it would be great. And he's shown some interest in Foundry, and so we thought it'd be great to actually, from scratch, walk a DM through how to make the switch from Roll20 to Foundry. What are things that it enables for you coming to a platform like Foundry? What are some things that you need to know ahead of time? And then depending on how you run your game as a DM, what sorts of things would you want to know about, like in terms of like modules and capabilities, and, how heavy do you want to play automation versus, other things? And then, also like what kind of content do you want to use, and how do you port content into Foundry, and how do you get, sort of your legs under you as a DM? And so we thought we'd make a series on that, and we'd actually work directly with Vox on basically building out his first adventure on the Foundry platform. So hopefully you guys enjoy this. We'll do some supplementary videos around this, especially if it gets into like some hardcore like tutorial stuff. But that's at least the vision so far. You guys have anything to add to that?
No, I think that sums it up really well. I mean, that hits all the big topics that I'm interested in, and I'm looking forward to getting right into it.
Looking forward to it. And it's always interesting whenever you're approaching Foundry with someone who has not used Foundry before. There's things that you come to appreciate about Foundry that you had taken for granted. So excited to relive some of that.
Great. So with that, I think we're going to jump into this. And where this is going to start is probably not going to do a lot in Foundry today. What we want to do is just kind of ask the questions that any DM should be asking themselves if they're thinking about jumping into Foundry, because it can be a little daunting. So we're going to take it step by step. And, we're not going to do anything too crazy and advanced, right? But what we do want to do is, I think at the end of the day, we want to make really great experiences for our players. And at least for myself and Zephyr, we found the ability to do that on the Foundry platform. And so we want to help other DMs that are really maybe trying to, even level up what they're doing, to see if, we can give you some inspiration on this platform. So with that, maybe we can ask a few questions. So Vox, what kind of DM are you? Maybe give us a little bit of your history, and and maybe bring us up to kind of current point in time as far as your interest in doing these games online.
Yeah, so I first got into D&D almost 25 years ago with some friends of mine in middle school, high school era of gaming, when a lot of online platforms weren't even available. So a lot of my history has typically been actual tabletop D&D sessions. It was a little bit easier as a kid growing up being able to play. As an adult, it becomes more and more difficult. But with the online aspect of everything, it's becoming easier and easier again. And there were some periods there, like during college, where I kind of got away from it, and work and, life happens. But with kind of the whole situation with COVID and everything going on, I've gotten a lot back into it quite a bit more with some friends of mine that I've played with for years in various other games. And we've kind of decided a couple of years ago to kind of start getting into D&D, and I was a player rather than a DM, but for years I was doing DMing in a tabletop format. I haven't done too much DMing in a virtual environment, so this is kind of a little bit new to me. I've most recently gone through, or attempted to go through, the Tomb of Annihilation with 4 or 5 other people, and it ended in total disaster, but it was all good fun.
because of the storytelling, or because of technology, or where did the disaster come from?
The disaster came in from, we had a lot of really new players who were just kind of more into the story of their characters than the function of their characters, and learning, how to do the checks, how to just kind of use the platforms and understanding, how do I go through a dungeon? How do I look for traps? How do I solve problems and riddles and overcome obstacles? And then on top of that, combat. How do I actually be effective in combat without killing my party members and the crossfire and things like that? And so there were a lot of very hilarious moments in our sessions from time to time. And a lot of frustrating moments in our sessions from time to time as well. But in the end, it was a group of really good friends who had a good time playing and were willing to do it again. And here we are. So we've got another friend of ours who is getting ready to DM actually a Pathfinder session, the Abomination Vaults, which you can see in my Roll20 session here.
Mm-hmm.
He is much more proficient at Roll20 than I am. But I find it, while it's a great tool, I have found it personally to be a little clunky, or it doesn't play to my kind of style of storytelling, and letting the players kind of drive where everything goes and be creative. It kind of puts you in these little boxes from time to time that I don't like really kind of putting people in. So I started researching what other things were out there, and I talked to Zephyr a bit about, different options that were out there, and he mentioned Foundry. So I've been looking at that. I thought, hey, what a great opportunity to start off a new session, or start preparing a new session for after our Abomination Vaults, so that we don't end up in a situation again where we go 6 months without a game because nobody has one prepped. So that kind of gets us here today.
Yeah, great. Okay, so interesting. So we're probably going to unpack some of the stuff along the way, like, what feels clunky, or what feels kind of like you were in a box, and if we had a magic wand, how would we sort of relieve that, and what sorts of experiences or structures would we want to create for players, and then at least for Foundry, Zephyr and I can kind of comment on that. And what I'm hoping is that people who are following this series will also contribute comments. So as you're walking through some of the challenges, we're talking through things together and how we do things, that others listening in will, because there's so much that I can't know everything. I think there's, how many hundreds? Is there over 1,000 modules for Foundry at this point? It's just, it's too much for, one mortal person to possibly comprehend.
I think we might even be topping 2,000 at this point, actually.
That sounds right.
Very close, if not.
That sounds right. So it's really this giant sandbox where you can do almost anything you could imagine. But we kind of want to build up, right? We don't want to go crazy day one. And everyone knows that Zephyr and I can go a little bit crazy on the platform. So we're gonna crawl, walk, and run, hopefully. So as far as Vox, your style of DMing, can you kind of give us the broad strokes of that? Like, do you prefer theater of the mind? Do you prefer, do you give players, points for creativity? Like, how do you approach DMing?
Yeah, so I'm kind of, when it comes to DMing, I like the players to, one, it's all about the players. I want them to have fun. Some players I have found, they like to have a little bit more detail with some of the environment. Others I have found like to have more combat. Others I have found like to have a little bit more problem solving or riddles. Mm-hmm. What I like to do is kind of marry all of those together. I like to create an environment where a person does not necessarily feel like they have to follow a set path or a particular storyline, start to finish. Here's A, B, C, D, here we're done. I like to be able to give them the opportunity to kind of explore, offshoot, or if I feel like they're getting a little bored, maybe throw some flavor into it to pull them out and do some other things, which we'll unpack a little bit later, I think. And not necessarily within the module itself. To me, the pre-constructed modules and everything are a good starting point. I don't necessarily feel like they have to follow it page by page.
Yeah.
I in a lot of cases will give extra points or small benefits and boons for creativity and staying in character or playing to the strengths of their character. And sometimes I will let them know that I have given them those rewards. Other times I will not. And so it's kind of like you don't know whether or not you're missing out on something, or if you did a really bad thing, sometimes I just won't let you know what kind of an effect that's going to have later on.
Fantastic. Okay, good. Well, I can't wait to follow along with your games here. It sounds like a lot of fun. All right, so let's look at some foundational stuff. Like what, I think in this case, we're looking at D&D, right? As the game system, D&D 5e. And, what do you own? What systems are you using? Are you using things like D&D Beyond? Let's just kind of like inventory. And you may not be using anything at all, but what's kind of your starting point in terms of content and in tools that you're already using?
Yeah, so in terms of content, I'm a big avid book person. So I actually have a lot of the D&D 5e books. So as we sit here talking, I'm looking at my Icewind Dale Rime of the Frost Maiden. I have the monster manuals, the Tomb of Annihilation, Player's Handbook. I've probably got 15 books sitting here at my desk, all kinds of different things. In terms of resources within Roll20 or Foundry or D&D Beyond, I really don't have too much set up. I wanted to kind of take this opportunity for us to talk about what are the good things to get, whether, if we got the Rime of the Frost Maiden as an example from the D&D, what comes into Foundry nicely, what doesn't, what features might I look at in terms of adding on to the content that I could use in my sessions and everything. So it's really blank slate. We've got an opportunity where we can kind of pick and choose and show cradle to the grave.
Okay, good. I love it. All right. So give me a little bit of flavor on what you want to try to explore in terms of how you want to run your games in Foundry. And this is like, how do you want the technology to work for you, right? So for example, do you and are your players super happy and love just doing all of the calculation of combat where, they're going to roll like dice, wherever they're at on the other side of their laptop, or maybe some of your guys play in the same room? Or do you lean towards and want to at least investigate automating stuff? Things like that, like less, kind of calculating the damage and all that, and more, kind of automating that. Where do you land on that spectrum?
So for the group that I think that we'll have for the Rime of the Frost Maiden is that we will probably lean more towards the automation in terms of rolling damage, saving throws, and the like. And making it more about the story and the environment than the technical aspect of the rules, quote unquote. So with that being said, I don't want to automate it to a point where it's almost like you don't need me, right? I don't want them just going around finding stuff, reading stuff, figuring out where to go, who to talk to, and it kind of leading them down this path of A, B, C, D, E. I want to be able to throw, surprises at them from time to time and see how they react at different kind of stages of their development with how they are playing their characters and learning the rule set and everything pertaining to, the D&D 5e experience. So it's going to be, I think, a little bit of mix of both. My players will typically, I like them to, at least if we're in an environment like Roll20 or the like, to use the in-game rolls so that just for the sake of clarity, everybody sees it.
Mm-hmm.
I, as a DM, will sometimes make public rolls to where they can see that, so they kind of get an idea of what's going on in the background.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the times I will do that on my own with my own die sets that I have here, because, you know, sometimes I roll really good and I just don't want a beholder to pop out and eat them at level 4, right?
Right.
So the whole goal is for everybody to have fun, make it as far as they can. I'm not really out to kill people or make it frustrating. So
Fair. Okay.
good balance of automation
and control, right? As a DM, you want to be able to control the story and make sure that you're creating a fun game for your players. What about like effects? How much are you interested in like animation effects, and when the barbarian swings, lets out a guttural roar, and you see like an actual animated swing, or spells like fireballs that explode in actual animation. How much do you care about that?
So I can understand a lot. To me, I see it in kind of like my third eye, and I don't really need it too much. My players love it. Okay. And I love that for them.
Mm-hmm.
So the biggest challenge that I would say is that we have tried to do graphics in the past, and it's fun for seeing something pop up on the screen every now and then. But sometimes they get confused with, especially new players. They're like, okay, you hit this fireball, and the rule is that it's like a 40-foot radius, but the ball is like not scaled correctly.
Yeah.
And so the radius is like 400 feet. And they're like, well, I hit that goblin on the other side of the mountain. Why isn't it dead? And it's like, well, it's just because it's the graphic,
Yeah.
So as long as I can control some of that to kind of lessen the confusion, I'm willing to put that work in for them to be able to see those. I think that's great. I don't want to micromanage it to the point where it becomes like a top-down monster killer.
Yeah.
So
like a video game kind of thing.
Exactly. So I think it's great for spells. I would like to do a few maybe basic melee things for each character, but not have an entire tool set for each token that ever is going to be on the board for them to interact with.
Sure.
The spells are great because there's such a variety of them. I want them to be able to tie some type of visual cue to things that they really like. So if they find that they like Fireball, for example, and it's a spell that they really like, they want to use it, I want them to correlate, I like this spell with this graphic and everything, so I remember to use it or whatnot. But not only that, but to see new things, So I'm all up for the animation as long as I can get to a point where it doesn't become I need to prepare 120 hours in advance to kind of make sure that interaction is going to work properly and not cause issues with the game itself. We have had that happen in the past where like people are at different layers, they can't see it, and then we're trying to fix it, and then all of a sudden everybody can see the whole map and stuff like that. And so then they know where stuff's at, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's like this went downhill very quickly just because we wanted to see a little splash of color.
Yeah. Boy, wait till you see what we've got in store for you. Okay. So is everybody going to be chatting? Are they used to, being on Discord or Zoom? Are they used to seeing each other's faces and, having a chat in front of them? And
yeah, typically we'll use Discord.
Okay.
We don't, some people will do video.
Mm-hmm.
Roll20 is really good about that, about being able to show your video if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
99% of the time, people will just use an imported image for their thing, which is fine. It doesn't matter to me as long as they understand who they are and where they're going.
Yeah. Great. Okay. And you said in terms of exploration, you said that, well, some players like puzzles. A lot of these puzzles, I assume, are going to be puzzles that you sort of articulate and paint the picture with words and theater of the mind. Have you ever explored, puzzles that, the actual visual puzzles, like letting them interact with things on the screen and solve puzzles that way? Is that
Yes.
interesting?
I've experimented with that a little bit. We did some of that. I worked with our DM in our Tomb of Annihilation, and Tomb of Annihilation is a great adventure for puzzles, right? And so there were times where you needed to move some of the aspects around and get them in the right order, or figure out how to step through them on the floor without triggering a trap or whatnot. And it became a little cumbersome. It looked like somebody was trying to do something in paint when we were all said and done with it. Like, I want this one to go over here, I want that one to go over there. So it was kind of difficult, but I would really like to embed some puzzles that may just like open up a little coin purse or something. But as long as somebody can go over there and click and maybe put the pattern in the right order real quick, they get it. And then after that, they get it. It's not anybody else. It's not there. It's not there for everybody to go get.
Yeah.
These little Easter eggs, as I call them, to kind of, for people to actually interact with while I'm telling the story. Because I feel like sometimes they get distracted or bored, and I want them to explore the map. So I'd like to contain them to an area, but then they can move around at free will while we're setting the scene and explaining the story, or maybe while somebody else is interacting with an NPC, maybe somebody else can go off to the other corner of the end and look under the table and find a note that said, the law was after me, and so I just hid my cachet of jewels out behind the wood pile, and then they go and get it while this other person's talking, and they get like 20 GP worth of jewels or something, just to keep them in the game and not like, okay, I'm going to go grab a drink and run out and let the dog out and go talk to my neighbor for a minute while they're doing this big long spiel.
Yeah. Okay, good. I love that. So you want to give them opportunities to be able to stay engaged in the game, even though maybe they're not, engaged in whatever dialogue's happening right now, but you're okay with a little bit of exploration of the scene. And I think that's what VTT gives us, right? It promises us the screen that, if we take advantage of it, our players can have a little bit more to do than, just listen to us talk all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm like, with the fog of war and Roll20, people could move around, and I found that sometimes if you give people too much freedom, they just want to clear all the black, right?
Yeah.
And what I kind of like the idea of it not necessarily being like opaque fog of war, you can't see anything. I don't care if you want to explore the map that I limit you to, but I don't want you to be able to kind of basically just scrub the screen, essentially. I want you to be able to see kind of what your character would see, and then also not reveal things that I may pop in later. So like, you may go into this forest area and search this cabin that's in the woods, and you're looking around and you clear the entire image, but you wait a few minutes or whatnot, and you go back to a different area, and now I've thrown some goblins or something in there that are like, oh, surprise, these weren't here 5 minutes ago. But just because I scrubbed the screen, it's not like, okay, now I can see you pull the enemy tokens into the field of view.
Yeah. So some exploration with limits, with controls around it.
Yes.
Would be ideal. Okay. Love it. Mm-hmm. Your general player setup, is everybody remote on laptops sitting at, or is anybody in a room together, or a mix?
It might be a mix. We do have some like couples that play together. Mm-hmm. And so they may sit next to one another on the same computer. They may be on independent computers. For the most part, what I tell everybody is that if you want to play together on the same computer, that's okay. It may get a little cumbersome in terms of who's logged in and has access and permissions to different character sheets and things that I need to be aware of. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit easier for a DM in Roll20 if everybody's on their own unit.
Yep.
So
we want to be able to accommodate for maybe a mix, right? Like or maybe it's an occasional situation where you can have people sharing a screen.
Yeah, but I don't think it's a situation where that is so important that we have to make an accommodation for it. None of my players would be like, well, I'm not going to play if I can't be on the same computer with my significant other or whatnot. It's all for fun. So
yeah,
they would probably be like, oh, okay, this is just easier if I go get my computer. So
okay. And what's typical as far as a game? How many players do you have at the table?
Historically, we have about 5 people. That's a DM and 4 players. We're getting some more interest in it with, as an example, the Abomination Vaults. We're getting ready to start in Pathfinder. I believe we are going to have 5 players in a DM. Okay. So that's about that. And that's going to be one of the largest ones we've had. So I would say that's pretty typical.
Yeah.
So 4 to 5 players and then the DM.
Okay. And I'm going to ask you to answer this honestly as you can. How do you rate yourself from just a technical aptitude perspective? 1 being you know nothing about technology and care to avoid it. 10 being you're a software developer and can accomplish anything.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm a software developer, but I'd rank myself around an 8 or a 9. So I'm an automation engineer by trade in training. So we do all kinds of technology. That's what I do, is technology. That's what has me very excited about Foundry. Is I was reading the documentation on the API today. So it was just like, okay, that's like my jam.
All right. So that's all I needed to know. If you've already found the API and you're digging into that, you're going to be right at home, because honestly, if you have any level of technical aptitude whatsoever, you can make the thing cook your breakfast for you. But we're not going to try to get too far afield, just because everyone else doesn't have your same aptitude.
I would probably catch on to that stuff a lot more readily than your average player or whatnot.
Yeah.
But for the sake of what we're doing here, it's like I'm green in terms of that. It's just that was interesting to me, so I started reading it. I don't want to automate it that much, but it has kind of given me some ideas for things in the future that I might like to try to integrate into my games to make them even more kind of inviting for people to come in and try things.
Great.
It sounds like we might need to connect you and Ripper at some point too.
Oh gosh, that's dangerous. Ripper is a very prolific developer in the Foundry ecosystem. He's in Italy, and he's a bit of a maniac. Ripper, I know you're listening to this, but he's one of my favorite folks in the community, just because he's very creative, and if you tell him something's not possible to do, he'll come back the next day with it solved. So
those types of people are my spirit animals.
Right, exactly.
I love when people say, no, it can't be done, you can't do this, and I'm just like, okay, give me a few days.
It's great. Last question, and then I think what we'll do is we'll try to walk through, if you guys are up for it, we'll try to walk through just getting Foundry installed, and just getting to the basics of like having a world kind of ready to sort of a clean world ready to start doing stuff in. Does that sound?
Before we get into that, one other thing that I wanted to also say was that I'm a big fan of like the maps and resources in the pre-constructed books, but I am not married to them either. I think part of being creative is just having a good tool set to be able to do that. So while I would like to maybe have some of the resources from the books themselves, I would also like to be able to maybe create some of my own and use them throughout any of my sessions.
Okay, great. So that is a good question. Do you like making your own maps, or do you go that far as like, hey, I'd really like to be able to just kind of design stuff or sort of semi-design it, where maybe just using tiles and, kind of putting some things here and there, or do you like going in, and designing them, drawing maps? Like where are you at with this, your ability and willingness and even, aptitude for designing things?
Yeah, so my willingness is very high for doing that. I haven't experienced the Foundry, so I don't know what it's like or whatnot. To me, a lot of that creativity is just getting in there and getting your hands into the dirt and the paint and everything. Um, I like to be able to design those so that I can tailor them to what I want to have happen a little bit and the challenges that I'm going to pose to my players. But I also like to have pre-constructed things to where, like, if I don't have hours and hours to prepare one, that I can grab and go. Or a lot of the times, sometimes my players will go off in some tangent I never even dreamt they'd go off into. And okay, now I got to just go grab a map.
Yeah.
So I need to have enough resources available that I would like to be somewhat close to the resources in the book, but not identical. But then also be able to swap things in and out easily without needing to kind of like completely customize the entire storyline.
Great. Okay, good. Well, boy, are we going to have some fun stuff for you then. Well, the last question is really about hosting. Foundry, if you just get the default Foundry, you can install it on your local machine, and your local machine becomes the host, right? It's it's what everyone else in the world, when they're playing the game, what they'll ultimately receive their images of the map from, and sound effects and stuff like that will be actually served off of your local machine through your internet connection out to the cloud and then down to their machines. And alternatively, you can host Foundry, right? There's different hosting services like Forge, where they sort of they just let you put your Foundry instance in the cloud, and they have other things that help with like deliverability and stuff like that. Caching and sending files around the universe and that sort of thing. You don't have to host on your local machine. Do you have any limitations or proclivity either way, or do you want us to explore that and make that decision later?
So my big thing is I want my players to have the best experience possible. I have a very beefy computer. I have an unlimited 1 gig fiber connection to the internet. So it's not like I am limited by bandwidth in any way, shape, or form. So I don't really know what the best core option is. I will pick and do whatever is going to give my players the best possible experience.
Great.
I have had times in Roll20 where things are very laggy. People are seeing stuff and tokens are stuck for other people, or things aren't clearing. And I really don't want to have that happen to where then I have to back up and play catch up and troubleshooting. I don't like having troubleshooting sessions in the middle of my sessions because something isn't working the way that I anticipated it for everybody, or the way that I see it for everybody.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
And some people are more apt to speak up than others sometimes. And so it's like, some people will be like, whoa, hold on a second. This just didn't work for me. Like you said, other people will wait like 10 minutes. And then it's like, okay, how far back do I have to go?
Yeah. Your players geographically, are they all in the US? Are they in the same region?
Yeah, they're typically all in the US, but they are kind of all over. I would say most of them are in like the central standard time zone.
Okay.
We have a couple on the east. We have a couple on the west. So
great.
It's really all over.
I'm really just interested in speed of light issues. Your latency when you're sending a lot of information to someplace like Japan, you're just going to have the time it takes for electrons to get around the curvature of the Earth. So as long as that's not the case, and it sounds like it's not, if you had players all over the world, I'd probably recommend a hosting service just to help cache files closer to where the users are, rather than your machine. But I think, and Zephyr, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think sounds like he got plenty respectable setup at home that we could really start this off as a locally hosted game, and then we can always move off of that later if we feel like we need to.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think having your own machine, then that takes all of the data storage issues, well, not all of them, but most of them off the table there. So that really makes things a lot easier. And the internet connection is not a problem. So that makes it easier. As long as you're comfortable with port forwarding down the line, then I think that makes sense here. And like you said, Bailey, if later down the line it makes more sense to move to a hosting service or even to like a cloud computing instance on Amazon Web Services or Oracle to actually run the instance, then we can approach that later and it's pretty easy to transfer over. So local might be the way to go here to start.
Yeah. And it's free. There's no, besides the Foundry license, right? So, and I think a lot of people want to know what the free option is. I think, Roll20 to get like a lot of the good stuff. I think there's a subscription and stuff like that. And Foundry's nice that it's just a one-time purchase. But if you do want to use a hosting service, that would be something that would cost something per month. It's not a great expense, but
Yeah. And so my question with that would be, if I start with the local, is it easy to go and take my local and then start hosting it with a service easily, or am I going to be recreating things again in the future?
So I started that way, and in fact, I run my games locally, but I also have I also moved to Forge at 1.2, and now I kind of like operate between both, depending on if I'm developing and things like that. But the Forge was really easy. So I had my local game, and then I signed up with Forge because I wanted to try that because I had players that were pretty far flung. And so I moved my game to the Forge, and it was a pretty, straightforward. And I would say the Forge is probably the biggest hosting provider for Foundry today. And it was a pretty easy process. So it's a decision that you can make at any time later.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Without any issue.
Yeah, to chime in on like cloud computing instances, which is what I had some familiarity with in terms of running my games off of those, it couldn't be easier to move files between your local and your cloud computing instance. It's as simple as basically just copying and pasting files over and you're good. So I've made backups or had local testing worlds that then I've put data up very easily on cloud computing. So definitely not a decision that you're locked into right now.
And my users won't really see any difference, right? It's not.
Yeah, the only real difference would be, between the connections to your host machine versus the connection to whatever hosting service or cloud compute service that you're using. And obviously, if you're changing any kind of where they're actually logging in at, then that could change the experience. But for the most part, it's a pretty seamless transition. It's just where are they logging in at.
Excellent. Okay.
Great. Okay. So I think we can get as far as getting, getting the world set up, starting to bring content and things like that. And then we can make the call on hosting if and when it becomes necessary later.
Hey everyone, this is Zephyr. I hope that you have enjoyed this conversation with Vox as much as we did. We're going to actually break this session into 2 parts, and in the next episode, we're going to get into installing and getting started in Foundry with Vox. So stay tuned for that next installment. In the comments, let us know if there are any questions that you think we should have asked Vox before diving into Foundry, and what you want to see us cover next with Vox in this series. Once again, this has been Zephyr with the Bailiwiki channel, where we teach everyday DMs how to create truly amazing experiences for their players by combining art and technology. We also make modular systems and scenes that you can use without any setup. If you're a DM that likes to leverage platforms like Foundry Virtual Tabletop and Dungeon Draft, then you're in the right place. Subscribe to keep up with all of our latest content, and consider becoming a patron. Not only do you support the channel, but you'll also gain access to every modular system and scene that we've ever made. Thanks so much for watching, happy gaming, and have a good one.